aspects of the agriculture business, production right through to transport and distribution. The Agro-Mafia Observatory, an organisation that analyses criminal involvement in the food chain, estimates that the Italian mafia's food-related business was worth 24.5 billion euros in 2019, accounting for an estimated 10% of the mafia's total turnover. A business that's underpinned by the practice of modern slavery. The mafia exploits cheap labour by acquiring tomato pickers through the caporalato system, where the caporale, the gangmaster, acts as a middleman, recruiting workers on behalf of the farm owner and taking a cut of their wages. The labourers are mostly migrants, many of whom have made the perilous journey across the Mediterranean from North Africa to Western Europe in search of safety and work. They are recruited with the promise of work contracts, which is a requirement for gaining residency in Italy, but the documents they might receive from the caporale are often false. Labourers usually work 12-hour shifts, 7 days a week, hand-picking tomatoes with minimal pay, little respite, and no access to medical care. They are paid around €3.50 for a 300-kilogram crate of tomatoes, or €5.50 for tomatoes. It's hard to make much more than €30 a day, and out of these earnings, they're expected to pay around €3 for transportation to and from the fields, obliged to buy food and water, €3 to €4, charged 50 cents to charge a phone, and as much as €20 to be taken to a hospital. This exploitative, coercive labour is often described as modern slavery. In 2021, the UN estimated that between 400,000 and 430,000 workers were working under the caporalato system, and from 2013 to 2019, more than 1,500 people have died as a result of these working conditions.
Le nuove norme contro il lavoro nero e sfruttamento in agricoltura prevedono sanzioni molto dure, ma una farsa.
The caporalato system was outlawed in 2016, so farmers who rely on caporale can be punished with up to 8 years in jail. But the problem persists. As long as supermarkets continue to compete for the cheapest prices, exploitation that exists across the food industry will continue to be exacerbated. For example, the price of tin tomatoes is often too low to cover the costs of production, making the caporalato system a persistent problem. Supermarkets point to a certification system, but it has failed to eradicate the practice. And with Italy's new Prime Minister making no secret of her hostility against so-called illegal immigration, many migrants are being left with very little support in areas dominated by organised crime.
Areas of Eastern and Southern Africa are currently in the grip of a vulture crisis, where vultures are being inadvertently poisoned in their thousands. 7 of Africa's 11 vulture species are now listed as endangered or critically endangered, with some having fallen by as much as 97% within the last 50 years. But the birds themselves aren't the intended targets, and the consequences have been known to have a devastating impact on humans. To understand why, we need only to look to India, where the effects of a near total vulture extinction are still being felt today. So how does killing vultures endanger human life? Africa is home to at least a quarter of all known species of mammals, and 18% of the human population. However, this relationship is not always harmonious.